During the mid-80s, Oberheim created the Matrix product line of synthesizers, which would prove to be the last engineering effort Oberheim completed before unfortunately going bankrupt in 1985 and ultimately selling the brand to Gibson in 1988. Despite creating some impressive high-end monster analog polysynths, such as the recent OB8 only a few years previous, Oberheim was now in financial trouble and needed a synth that was more in tune with the growing market of budget-conscious amateur musicians that were looking for a synthesizer that could do many things all in one reliable package. Marcus Ryle and his engineering team looked at the landscape of what was happening in the synth design world. Sales of the DX7 were through the roof, with its simple aesthetic and unique FM synth engine captivating the market. But other technology was also developing quickly, such as MIDI, new DCO-based synths, and all-digital synths with a large variety of digital waveforms which could be used as oscillators. The concept of multi-timbral synths were also something new and exciting, especially when used with external sequencing to drive different sounds on separate MIDI channels. Tom Oberheim had given his engineers a lot of freedom to design the synth of their dreams, and Marcus Ryle had a vision for a synth where a vast number of modulations could be internally routed to almost any parameter. Of course, Oberheim engineers threw everything they had at their new project and created the Expander, an incredibly complex and powerful keyboardless synth module. Shortly afterwards, they doubled this design into the massive Matrix-12, which was one of the most complex synthesizers ever created. Of course, with a price tag of $6,500, this was no cheap investment. It did not solve Oberheim's need for commercial success. The good news, however, was that they also had a smaller scale version of the Matrix-12 in development, the Matrix-6. And although providing the same concept of the Matrix-12, it had a much reduced feature set. Released in 1985, the Matrix-6 has a similar look to a few other synths right around this time, Roland JX8P and the Kawai K3, which were also heavily influenced by the sleek look of the DX7. Similar to the Expander and the Matrix-12, the heart of the Matrix-6 is still the matrix modulation concept, although it has much fewer routing possibilities than its big brothers. Nonetheless, this modulation matrix gives this synth a surprisingly large amount of sound-shaping features, as any of the 20 sources can modulate one of 32 destinations. Working closely with chip designer Doug Curtis, the Matrix-6 utilizes the Curtis Music 3396 synth on a chip, which was created for this project, and only used on two other synths, the Cheetah MS6 and the Elka EK22. This was Doug Curtis's all-in-one design, which was to be cost-saving by reducing the number of ICs required on the voice board, but also improving reliability with less points of failure. The oscillators of the Matrix-6 are much different in design from the Matrix-12 using DCOs. However, the synth on a chip still seems to give that Curtis sound, which when configured correctly also is very much the heart of the 80s Oberheim sound. The Matrix-6 filter design is a 4-pole 24 dB LPF filter, which is much different than the Matrix-12's multimode filter, but regardless of this, it does retain the sound and resonance that Oberheim was known for with his OB series synths. The Matrix-6 is also completely two-part multi-timbral with split points on the keyboard, which can be assigned to separate MIDI channels and be routed out separate mono outputs. Where the Matrix-6 shines is with its matrix modulation, and this gives the synth some very creative and extreme patching combinations that you would not find on a typical subtractive synthesizer. Patching options such as routing an LFO to the FM source on DCO1 can help create DX7-like sounds, which add more complexity to the already rich synth engine. In 1986, Oberheim released the rack-mount Matrix-6R, which is very much the same synth without the keyboard. In 1988, the now Gibson-owned Oberheim released the Matrix-1000, a very successful single-space rack-mount version of the Matrix-6, with no onboard editing capabilities, but instead 800 presets stored in ROM and 200 user-assignable patches stored in RAM. The fact that you could get 1,000 unique sounds so easily out of the Matrix 1000 really showed the advantage of the flexible and powerful synth engine, and the Matrix 1000 went on to sell very well for many years with multiple release versions. Despite not being as grandiose as the other Oberheim synths in its heritage, the Matrix-6 really does have that Oberheim sound. And if you can live with its quirky interface and slightly tedious programming, this synth is a great addition to any studio.